It's the OFM Business Hour. I'm William. Now, if you haven't heard yet, according to varied media outlets, the South African government has invited businesses in the country to submit expressions of interest in the pilot of the Trusted Employer Scheme in a bid to attract skills and services from abroad. The announcement was made by the Department of Home Affairs against the backdrop of President Cyril Ramaphosa's SONA, in which he said the government would be reviewing its visa application system to make it easier for foreigners to travel to the country for tourism, business, and work. Previously on the show, we were joined by Marisa Jacobs, Managing Director of Xpatweb, in which she got into the backlog that exists at the Department of Home Affairs with respect to work visas. Today, she's joining us to unpack this Trusted Employer Scheme and get into in what way is it a repackaging of the existing corporate account service, and touch on which businesses are eligible for this pilot project. Here's our discussion. So the last time we spoke to you, Marisa, we got into that really horrible backlog at Home Affairs with respect to work visas. My understanding is that the same department has launched the repackaging of the corporate accounts service with a pilot project for trusted employers. It's called the Trusted Employer Scheme. Tell us a bit more about this pilot project.
So I think as business, everyone is very excited about this project. The Trusted Employer Scheme is really designed and aimed to assist large corporates in South Africa who are bringing in foreign talent to have a separate service specifically for them to enable them to bring foreign talent in quicker and more hassle-free. That's what it aims to achieve.
So you mentioned that the Trusted Employer Scheme is a separate system. What are its key features, essentially?
What we're used to at the moment is that there's what they call a corporate accounts unit within the Department of Home Affairs. So it's a separate unit with separate adjudicators and a separate premium facility where employees of those employers can go and submit. So the Trusted Employer Scheme is supposed to be an even more elevated version of that service. So where there will be specific centres at which those applicants can go and submit their applications. There will be reduced document requirements for anyone who employs under the Trusted Employer Scheme, or some additional leeway to say, yes, you still need to bring police clearances, but you don't have to submit it with the application. You can submit it within 12 months, as an example. So it gives a bit of leeway to get the application in quicker, and then the documentation burden can follow a bit later so that we don't delay bringing in talent. And then secondly, which I think is also important, is then more predictable time frames. So what they're suggesting is to say, if you are a trusted employer, there will be a set processing time under which we will issue work visas for trusted employers.
I mean, you've mentioned that this is for quite large corporates. Are they going to verify the employers in any way in order to be able to be placed on the system?
Absolutely. So there's very specific criteria that a company needs to meet to be able to apply. Companies can then apply. The closing deadline is 20 November, by which they need to submit their applications. The department will then go through those applications, and they're only allowing, I think it's the first 100 employers that qualify to be part of this pilot project. And then when they initially presented this to us, it's not all included in the Gazette, but the presentation that was presented through to us earlier, which outlined a bit more detail, spoke about the pilot project running for 90 days. And then after that pilot project, they would then open it up again for more employers once they've learned some lessons and been able to tweak the scheme to really work. What we can see is from the Gazette is what those criteria are going to be, and the threshold is quite high. So not all companies will qualify.
Yes. There is a point-based system for the selection criteria. You mind expanding on some of those categories and the points?
So there's 5 categories, and each category has a point allocation to it. And then in order to qualify to apply for this pilot project, you need to gather at least 80 points on the point system. So the first item on there is pledges. So pledges refers to any company who pledged foreign investment at President Cyril Ramaphosa's annual investment conference. So if you pledge there, automatically you will gather those 30 points. What they've added from the initial draft is it says /proven investment. So any employer who has previously invested, the Gazette outlines since 2018, who has invested and can show that there's an investment into South Africa, will also be able to garner those points. Then the other categories are around employment, sector, skills transfer and development, and equity equivalence to gather the points.
I just want to understand the logistics as well. You said deadline is November and the pilot project is expected to run for 3 months. Beginning when? Do they set a date out in the Gazette?
They have not set out a date, so when the deadline closes 20 November, we expect that they will take some time to go through the applications and to whittle down who will then be on the scheme. So I'm guessing that it will only be early in the new year we will actually start seeing the rollout of the employer scheme.
Thanks, Marisa. Can you weigh in a bit more on the overall reception of the scheme? What is the general sentiment amongst practitioners in your field and, of course, most importantly, amongst large corporates in the country that utilize talent from outside of the country?
So I think there's a lot of positivity in the market around it, because anything where there is a suggestion of less red tape, faster processing times, makes business excited. So the general sense is, well done, Home Affairs. Thank you for bringing this into effect. We cannot wait to see it in action. But on the other side, I think there's a lot of, we've heard from the market, a lot of smaller employers that would have liked to be part of the scheme, but obviously don't meet those criteria. So I do think there's mixed feelings around there. But what the department has made very clear is that there's nothing happening with the corporate accounts unit. That unit will still remain. So anyone who doesn't qualify as a trusted employer will still be serviced by the corporate accounts unit. So they mustn't worry about that. They can still get visas. This is really something where they are testing how can we, for a smaller select group, make things quicker and easier. And we must, for me, I hope that once they figure out how to do it better for a smaller group, we will see some of those benefits spill over to everyone.
Your advice on the Trusted Employer Scheme, Marisa?
I just think employers shouldn't leave it too late. I know the deadline is 20 November and everyone thinks that's far away, but there's quite a bit of documentation that needs to be submitted for this application. You need to do an extensive motivation, obviously prove all the investment, show your employment numbers, your sector, your staff, all of this. It takes time to put together, especially for those larger corporates. So my absolute advice is get it in as quickly as possible, start working on those submissions and make sure that you are one of the first 100. I think it's going to be an amazing program.
Thank you so much to Marisa Jacobs for educating us on the Trusted Employer Scheme. Some important things to know. Parties, i.e. businesses or organizations that want to partake in the pilot with the Department of Home Affairs, have until 20 November to apply. The threshold and requirements are quite high and include a proven track record of investment into the country. So ensure you apply ahead of time as per Marisa's advice. There is a lot to fill in. You need to also write out your motivations.